From Thom Hartmann's Daily Take Substack. Trump is preparing the military for political war, and he's using a Confederate traitor to do it. By rewriting history, staging propaganda events, and testing the military's loyalty, is Trump laying the groundwork for a future coup attempt? Published June 12, 2025. The following is a song inspired by this article.
How robbery cracked the whip, tore the flag with a traitor's grip. Blood on his hands from a war he chose, 750,000 ghosts. Built on backs and salted skin, he fought to keep the horrors in. Not a hero, not a saint, he's the face of a rebel's hate. So how did Lee become their star? Waving flags in rebel bars. From whipping slaves to soldier cheers, they trade our truth for ancient fears. When facts are buried, lies live on. That's how Lee became a MAGA icon. They cheered a felon in uniform, a rally stage, tradition torn, with hand-picked troops and camera lights. He sold them rage and civil fights. He bragged of Lee like he knew pride, but all he knew was how to divide. And the base he claimed in honor's name now echoes with betrayal's flame. So how did Lee become their star? A martyr carved in culture's scar, a general lost, a war long gone, revived by those who can't move on. When truth is scorched and history pawned, that's how Lee became a MAGA icon. Washington warned us in his plea, don't let the military bend a knee. But now they cheer a life-fed man who twists the past to fit his plan. The line is blurred, the risk is real, when uniforms salute false zeal, and justice hides behind a wall while tyrants rise and heroes fall. Whose side are you on? In the end, the rule of law, or just pretend? Is loyalty owed to truth and right, or to a con lit by torchlight? Yeah, that's how Lee became their star. Not by truth, but by PR. Through speeches filled with fraud and fear, through soldiers forced to clap and cheer. But we remember what he's done, and we won't bow to a MAGA icon. No base, no statue, no white lie can sanctify a traitor's cry. He led a war to kill the dream. Now they want to make him king, but we won't kneel. We won't forget. We ain't done fighting treason yet.
Robert E. Lee killed more Americans than Hitler, more than Khrushchev, more than King George III, Ho Chi Minh, or Kim Il-sung. He killed more Americans than we've ever lost in every war since the American Revolution combined. He was the largest mass murderer of Americans in our nation's history. General Lee was not a good man. He was a morbidly rich oligarch who not only bought and sold enslaved human beings, but delighted in whipping and torturing them. 3 of the 200-plus enslaved peoples held at his plantation, Wesley Norris, his sister Mary, and their cousin George Parks, escaped and were captured in the nearby Maryland. The report in the March 26, 1866 edition of the New York Daily Tribune quoted Wesley Norris at length, tells us all about Lee's proclivities. Quote, "He then ordered us to the barn where, in his presence, we were tied firmly to posts by Mr. Gwynn, our overseer, who was ordered by General Lee to strip us to the waist and give us 50 lashes each, excepting my sister, who received but 20. General Lee, in the meantime, stood by and frequently enjoined Williams to, quote, lay it on well, end quote, an injunction which he did not fail to heed. Not satisfied with simply lacerating our naked flesh, General Lee then ordered the overseer to thoroughly wash our backs with excruciatingly painful saltwater brine, which was done, end quote. Fearing Lincoln might end slavery in America, Lee raised an army and tried to use it to end democracy in the United States. He thus committed treason in a way that exceeded even Benedict Arnold's wildest fantasies. His war killed almost 750,000 men, women, and children, all Americans. No American has ever betrayed or visited as much violence on this country as severely as did Robert E. Lee. And so, when Lee lost the war that he'd started against us, the federal government seized his slave plantation and turned it into a cemetery for the Civil War dead. It's today named Arlington National Cemetery. So, perhaps it makes perfect sense that the current chief betrayer of the ideals of our nation, convicted felon and Putin toady, Donald Trump, would brag to a group of American soldiers that he's going to rename a military base after Robert E. Lee. Even more shocking, in what's an astonishing indictment of how our educational system has de-emphasized civics in the years since Reagan and George W. Bush both took an axe to civics education, the assembled soldiers cheered the news that Lee's name would again desecrate a military facility. Trump then went on to repeatedly lie to our soldiers, falsely claiming that he won the 2020 election, which he told them was, quote, rigged and stolen, end quote. He sent the National Guard into Minnesota, quote, and I saved it, end quote, during the George Floyd protests, when it was in fact Governor Tim Walz who did so. He defeated ISIS in 4 weeks, and it took him years to liberate the ISIS caliphate. Nobody wanted to join the military under Biden, a blatant lie. Countries like Congo dumped their prisoners and people from their mental hospitals here, saying, quote, their countries would bust them or drive them right to our border and say, go in there. If you ever come back, we're going to kill you, end quote. He brought water into L.A. during the fires when in fact he just ordered a field flooded in Northern California, screwing up water allocations for agriculture. Echoed Hitler when he called Los Angeles protesters animals and a foreign enemy, end quote. Even more disgusting than that, Trump was nakedly using those soldiers he was lying to as political props to massage his own ego and provide a made-for-TV Fox News clip, as Military.com pointed out yesterday. Quote, internal 82nd Airborne Division communications received by Military.com reveal a tightly orchestrated effort to curate the optics of Trump's recent visit, including handpicking soldiers for the audience based on political leanings and physical appearance. The troops ultimately selected to be behind Trump and visible to the cameras were almost exclusively male. One unit-level message bluntly said, quote, no fat soldiers, end quote. This is the exact opposite of the instruction to keep the military nonpartisan that President George Washington gave future generations in his farewell address. Quote, the alternate domination of one faction over another, sharpened by the spirit of revenge, natural to party dissension in which different ages and countries have perpetrated the most horrid enormities, is itself a frightful despotism. But this leads at length to a more formal and permanent despotism. The disorders and miseries which result gradually incline the minds of men to seek security and repose in the absolute power of an individual, and sooner or later the chief of some prevailing faction, more able or more fortunate than his competitors, turn this disposition to the purposes of his own elevation on the ruins of public liberty. that the Secretary of Defense, quote, Kager, end quote, Pete Hegseth, would not just allow but intentionally facilitate such an offensive display of partisanship is particularly troubling when compared to the military's actual policies and Directive 1344.10 put into place years ago in respect to Washington's advice. Quote, in keeping with the traditional concept that members on active duty should not engage in partisan political activity and that members not on active duty should avoid inferences that their political activities imply or appear to imply official sponsorship, approval, or endorsement, the following policy shall apply. A member of the armed forces on active duty shall not participate in partisan political fundraising activities, rallies, conventions, management of campaigns, or debates, either on one's own behalf or on that of another, without respect to uniform and or inference or appearance of official sponsorship, approval, or endorsement. Attend partisan events as an official representative of the armed forces. This is a lawful general regulation. Violations of paragraph 4.1 through 4.5 of this directive by persons subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice are punishable under Article 92, quote, failure to obey order or regulation, end quote. When Trump blurs this line designed to keep our military nonpartisan, he's imitating the behavior of dictators like Putin, Erdogan, and Orban, who cultivate personal loyalty within the military rather than respect for constitutional processes. Trump and, quote, Kager's, end quote, move is apparently designed to test whether rank-and-file troops will go along with his political agenda and to build a foundation for future actions in which military force can be used domestically to defend his regime rather than the Constitution, e.g. suppressing protests, enforcing disputed election outcomes, defending the suspension of elections, etc. This is deeply dangerous to any democracy, which is why such behavior is not allowed by the military or executive of any other advanced democracy in the world. When military loyalty becomes politicized, the risk of coups, unlawful orders, or martial law rises dramatically, which, given the fact that Trump's already tried once to stage a coup against the United States, makes this all the more alarming. But Trump didn't stop there. He next attacked the media filming the event, saying to more applause from the troops, quote, and for a little news, for the fake news back there, the fake news, ladies and gentlemen, look at them, ay, what I have to put up with, fake news. What I have to put up with, end quote. In fascist regimes, the press is always one of the first targets, typically labeled as, quote, enemies of the people, end quote, blamed for national problems, and ultimately silenced or co-opted. Trump using such rhetoric normalizes contempt for independent journalism among armed agents of the state, while it suggests the possibility of state-aligned force being turned against critical media or dissenters. Nazi Germany, Mussolini's Italy, Putin's Russia, or more recently Orban's Hungary are all following this script. By repeating it, Trump is conditioning our soldiers to follow him rather than the Constitution and the law of the land. He even brought along a vendor of Trump merchandise in violation of military policy, including MAGA hats, T-shirts, and cards that read, quote, white privilege card. Trump's everything, end quote. Historically, when democracies have slid into dictatorship, there's a moment when the military is required to choose sides. The press is cast as a threat, and loyalty to the regime is demanded and rewarded, rather than loyalty to the law. We're there now, today. Every American, particularly those who've served in the military, should be outraged by Trump's fascist performance in front of our troops. That the only senior active duty military officer who spoke to the press did so anonymously. He said, quote, this has been a bad week for the Army, for anyone who cares about us being a neutral institution. This was shameful, unquote, is a damning indictment about how far away from American values we've let Trump drag our country.